I'm Joe Peroni from the Rise Above Project, and for today's show, I want to answer the question, what's the difference between an argument or a disagreement and verbal abuse? I find that this is very important, especially with couples, because communication is obviously very important, but there's also a lot of, I would say, downward pressure in our world today. We've become much more narcissistic, which creates problems in having good communication. And also, I believe social media is making it more and more possible, and it encourages people to be verbally abusive to other people, and I think it's invading our personal relationships as well. So I think it's something that's very important to talk about, and I'm going to try to tackle that today. But what we need to do first off is to decide which arguments are worth it and which ones are not. So if we start off with arguments, let's say from transactional relationships, such as business or people that are acquaintances, or just in your everyday life that you run into people. These types of arguments, at least to my mind, I believe they are winnable. And what does that mean when you try to win an argument? Well, for me, it's when I try to annihilate another human being, right? So I'm trying to show that their thought process is faulty. I'm trying to expose their weaknesses. I'm trying to expose that they have a lack of knowledge. I'm trying to expose that their point of view is not as good as mine, and therefore I should win, and I should get what I want. And in life, in business, sometimes those are really good qualities to have, to be able to do that. I tend to do that a lot in business. I'll give you an example. I don't want to get too detailed because confidentiality. But let's say this. Let's say I may or may not have had multiple arguments with psychiatrists over the last bunch of years. And what they'll want to do is put a 5-year-old on psychotropic meds for ADHD symptoms. Now, I'm not saying ADHD doesn't exist. But what I am saying is, if I'm in the room and they ask me my opinion, I will be very open, and I will ask the psychiatrist how long they have spent with this client, and do they know about their incredible trauma background. And most of the time the psychiatrist will say no. And at that point I have to remind them that most of the symptoms of ADHD correlate directly to trauma. So the thought to immediately put a 5-year-old on psychotropic drugs may not be the best move. So that's an argument that I tend to win most of the time, and I do point out to them where their mistakes are. So again, those are winnable. Now, here's the problem. When we're dealing with a loved one, or family members, or a husband or wife, let's just say for today, you don't have a lot of time, and you only have to listen to this video for 1 more minute. So and you don't want to take any other information from this video. Let me tell it to you like this. Never once can you ever, and I mean ever, you cannot win an argument with your loved one. You have to understand that. Those arguments are not winnable. Because all the things that I said before, you're trying to annihilate somebody, you're trying to show that they're faulty, you're trying to show that they're weak, that they have a lack of knowledge. You're trying to demoralize them. You're trying to move them to point A to point B, sometimes pretty forcefully. These types of things you never want to do with somebody that you love. You might think you win temporarily, but they are going to hold a grudge. And they're not going to love you like you want to be loved. And if you love them, you wouldn't be doing this to them anyway. So no, those are arguments you cannot win. What you really want to try to do with your partner is to connect with them. Because we all have different backgrounds, we all have different perceptions, we all have different experiences. So what you're trying to do is to really seek to understand your partner's point of view. And in doing so, you can have a disagreement, you can have an argument, but it's an expression of ideas, and you can actually get closer to your partner because you're learning more about them. What you're trying to do is collaborate with your partner to come up with a new and better idea that you can both take forward. And of course, the word compromise comes up a lot. In other words, you're going to both have to give. There needs to be a win-win. Now, let's say, for example, there's a rock concert on Saturday. My girlfriend wants to go out to dinner on Saturday, and there's not enough time to do both. Well, if that kind of compromise is going to have to be that one person is going to have to get what they want 100%, the other person gets 0%. But with the thought that the next time there's a decision to be made, the other person gets their 100%. So compromise doesn't have to mean a compromise all the time on everything. It just means eventually down the road that the scales will weigh themselves out. Now, why is it so important to really care about your partner and not to try to annihilate them and to try to listen to them in a conversation? I'm going to tell you the difficult news that people know, but they don't really want to hear. And I would say most people desire an emotional connection. Most people desire social connection. Most people desire sexual connection. Now, when we are in a long-term monogamous relationship, we put the burden of that, all of those connections, almost all of it, onto one person. And so with both partners, what they do is they basically put their heart out to another human being and they lay it in the other person's hand. And if they have it in their hand and they decide to make a fist and squeeze it and throw it down on the ground and degrade it and annihilate it, that's why the damage is so deep, is because in romantic relationships, we put so much of our connection and our love for life, and we run it through this other person, that when they take it and they dismantle it and treat somebody in a disrespectful way, it becomes extremely hurtful, and it's extremely hard to reverse that. So that's why I think it's important. So we really need to know how to go through this in a way that's respectful to both people. Now let's talk about the difference between a healthy disagreement and verbal abuse. In a healthy disagreement, there is no name calling, no personal attacks, no character assassinations. Now on the flip side of that, when people verbally abuse people, they do name call, they do attack the person. They attack the person at the expense of the argument. So what they're doing is they're not saying that they disagree with the person's idea, but they're disagreeing with the person as a human being, and they dislike who they are as a person, which cuts a lot deeper. Now, when we're talking about cutting people down like this, especially partners, we're talking about heavy criticism and an actual contempt for our partner. Now, it's okay to complain, right? Like the difference would be if you want to make a complaint if somebody forgets to do something, such as it's Monday night, garbage needs to be taken out on Tuesday morning, so somebody could say, hey, do you mind taking out the garbage on, tonight? Because you forgot last week and it was a bit of an issue, can you please take it out tonight? That's just a simple complaint. But if somebody said, listen, you forgot to take out the garbage last week because you are a very lazy human being that can't be trusted. And why should I trust you? Because everybody in your family is a bunch of losers too. Now, there's a big difference here between complaining and attacking somebody's character. So again, don't criticize the other person and don't ever talk to them in a contemptuous way. Now, in a healthy disagreement, people stay on the issue. And they only talk about one issue at a time because that's where the disagreement is. People who verbally abuse or tend to be narcissistic, they do what's called non-sequiturs. They talk about everything that surrounds the subject because they're not really talking directly and they're not trying to solve the problem. They're just trying to get their anger out and they're trying to get a rise out of the other person. This also can be called kitchen sinking, where If you have an argument on, say, a Sunday night, and then you start bringing stuff back from 10, 15, 20 years ago, or something that had nothing to do with the conversation. Again, these are non sequiturs and kitchen sinking that have nothing to do with trying to solve the argument. Now, when we go out of our way to character assassinate people, here's where the difficulty lies as far as I can see. Is that, again, we're adults here. As I'm talking to you, you know what I'm saying. Is that no matter how much we love another human being, and no matter how long we've been married or with this person, we know that they have a bunch of things about them that we don't like, that we find that are deficient, right? And you're not perfect either, and I'm not perfect as well. So we all have things that are not perfect that our partners put up with. And that's the beauty of it, right? That's called unconditional love. So we all know each other's weaknesses, we just choose to look past them, and we're okay with them. But when you have anger and contempt in your heart, the thing that you attack people on is probably going to be the truth of how you really feel. And if you cover it up with trying to be funny or humorous, that's called sarcasm. And when you're sarcastic to another human being, your partner, there's truth behind it. For example, let's say somebody was trying to make fun of me, and they said, well, you're under 6 feet tall, you're getting older and you're starting to turn gray. Those are hard things to take back because they're true. Now, it's either accepted or not accepted, but if you use it as a character assassination or an attack, it's really hard to back up and say you're sorry from that, because those are things that you actually see. It's like saying if somebody's overweight and bald, and what you're really saying is that you're not attracted to that person. So it's really hard to take back. So how do we solve that? Just go with the unconditional love, and no negativity such as that or character assassination should ever pass through your lips to another human being that's given their heart to you, and vice versa. In a healthy disagreement, you don't argue about stuff every single day. There's an effort to understand each other, an effort to seek to understand the other human being. When somebody's verbally abusive, there's a lot of accusations, there's a lot of attacks and attempts to demean and demoralize the other person. And they try to control the other person. And they tend to argue about the same stuff all the time, over and over. In a healthy disagreement, what happens is you can engage with the other person, but then at the end, there's a resolution to where you put the problem in a box, you close it up, you put a bow on it, and you put it away. And then you live life. People who are verbally abusive continuously pick at scabs. They continuously keep the box open because they want a place to put their anger and their hate, even though it may or may not be for their partner. It may be for life. It may be at their own job or the way that they see life. But the home or your partner is no place to put your anger. In healthy disagreements, people have the ability and they want to agree to disagree. John Gottman, who's probably the foremost expert in marriage and family therapy, talks about this a lot. He says that because we all come from different backgrounds and we all have different perceptions and beliefs, that actually most of the arguments we have never get resolved to where both people actually agree. What happens is that we agree to disagree because we respect the other human being for who they are and for what they are. So we can move on without trying to manipulate, coerce, and control another human being. Whereas if you are in a verbally abusive relationship, people will continuously try to win an argument. They will continuously try to control you. There will be malicious attempts to hurt you, to manipulate you into changing because one pain is not worth it, so then they can try to break you down. in healthy disagreements or people, they don't contest everything. Now, I know people are different and we're gonna have our disagreements, as I've already said. But let's say somebody says something to you, your partner says something, and you agree with it 90% of it. Isn't that okay? Do you have to be the one person in their life that points out the negative? Do you have to be the person in their life that says, oh, by the way, I know the exception to that rule and you're wrong in this way and this way? I mean, is that how you build a good relationship? By being the one thorn in their side all the time that has to point out, they may have done 10 successful things in their life, but you're gonna point out the one time when they messed up, or the other 10 times they messed up. Is that your job when you're trying to love somebody unconditionally? So in verbally abusive relationships, people never move on. They have the same fight all the time, different day. And what it's called is circular conversations. And you see this a lot, and you see this more and more. This is what I alluded to at the very beginning of the show. Narcissistic people who do have a sadisticness in them enjoy seeing the pain of others. And you see this a lot, right? Like people like to trigger other people. We have a president now who people support him, and that's fine depending on what you support him for. I don't know why, somebody's reason of being would be. But here's an example. If you can point out to somebody where somebody lied about something that was a factual thing, and you give them a fact, and they're still going to argue with it. They're going to justify that lying is okay. What you're doing is you're taking a narcissistic president, and the people who support him do, not all of them, but many of them do have this narcissistic trend in them with a degree of sadisticness. And so if you try to converse with them, you will never get them to admit anything. You will never get to a conclusion. It doesn't matter. You'll never get there. It's, again, circular argument. They're not there to give you a cogent argument with facts and to be reasonable. They're there to agitate you and to make you feel bad. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people in life like this, and there's a lot of people who are attracted to people who are narcissists. So you're going to get this type of verbal abuse in relationships all the time. Now, I want to finish with this. I did talk about contemptuousness, and I want to talk about this one subject that I think John Gottman has a really good handle on it. So I want to read it word for word. It's this small piece, but I'll add to it. This is, again, just to make sure, this is not my words here. This is John Gottman's. Contempt is a tricky thing. It's destructive to the love in a relationship, and yet it can be insidious. Often, subtle forms of contempt feel perfectly justified, such as, I'm just standing up for myself, or I'm just telling it like it is. But what you may not realize is that you're standing up for yourself against your partner, and you're putting yourselves in opposition to each other. So while contempt may seem like the expression of a genuine feeling, it's actually an expression of negative judgment. Try to practice expressing yourself with feelings and longings that can unite you and your partner, rather than judgments that can divide. What I would have to add to this is, it goes back to what I was saying, is that you don't have to challenge everybody. One of the questions I get from people a lot is, being a marriage and family therapist, doesn't it make your relationships much easier? And isn't it easier to talk to people that are other therapists who are supposed to be communication experts? And oddly enough, my answer is no. I think therapists are some of the hardest people to get along with. And why? Because they're always psychoanalyzing and exploring every worded sentence you say. And it's almost like every sentence you say, you have to make it so pinpoint accurate that they're going to challenge you on it. That's no way to live a life. You can do that in business, sure. I mean, I'll mix it up, psychologically with somebody at work, and I'll try to make them look deficient or annihilate their opinions. I can do that. But who wants to come home to that? And who wants to do that to their partner? It makes no sense to do that. You should be doing everything you can to get closer to your partner and to love them more, not to try to shoot holes in their arguments. That makes no sense to me. And so let me end with this. I see a lot of people who go to work every day, and whether you're dealing with your colleagues or clients, people have this attitude of, how can I help you? How can I serve you? How much more can I do for you? Are you happy with today's service? How can I make you come back? And they're so loving and caring and kind and compassionate and empathetic with their clients. And it's sometimes a difficult thing to do that, to listen all day and to be that person of service. But I think they forget that the service really needs to start mainly at home. And that by the time they come home, they're ready to throw up on their partner and they show them the negativity. Or just as bad, they become very defensive or withdrawn to where they don't want to talk at all. And I'm not saying I'm innocent of all that, because I'm a human being as well. But I would also say that it's extremely destructive to do such a thing. And if you can treat a bank teller or any clients or any people out in the world, if you can treat them special and make them feel loved and cared about, and that you're out for their best interest, I think it behooves you in every case to do that for your partner at home, because that's where it starts. And I don't think verbal abuse really should be a form of anybody's life, and it certainly shouldn't be walking through your doorstep at home. You should never have your doorstep darkened by that type of language or contempt or viciousness or being critical. Definitely at home. It should be an area of peace. So I hope you enjoyed today's show. My name is Joseph Peroni from the Rise Above Project. Hopefully you found this valuable, and if you did, you can subscribe. And if you did that already, I'll ask you to do one more thing. Hopefully you can send it on to a friend, because I think I have 269 subscribers now, which makes me about 350,000 subscribers below some of the people who do the same job that I do, but I actually do it better, which I guess that's a story for another day. But anyway, thank you for listening. I'm Joe Peroni. See you next time.